Hello, hello. Happy Friday, and welcome to another episode of Coach's Corner Health. I am one of your co-hosts, Leslie Goddard, mindset and emotional awareness coach for women who are on a mission to make a bigger impact in the world. They strive to adopt a both and rather than an either or mindset and are looking to add more value to their lives. I show them that it's possible to do this effectively and efficiently through their time management and developing an unstoppable mindset, learning how to manage their emotions, protecting their time, and they will get more done and have fun doing it. Andy.
Yes. Yes, they will. Have fun and get more done.
Yes.
Um, Hello, everybody. I'm Andy Lidstone. I'm the I'm the unconditional boundaries coach. I do deal with emotions as well, but not nearly in the same way that Leslie does. Um, I talk more about boundaries, more about how to set up boundaries for yourself, how to set up boundaries in relationships, and I have a unique way of teaching boundaries that is slightly different than what you might have been used to. So, I help people with all kinds of issues, from controlling partners to being controlling to how to figure out how to connect with people and how to keep myself safe from harm. That's what I do, and people really um, are finding that they are finding more happiness, more peace, more love, um, less stress, more of the things they want and less of the things they don't. So yeah, that's who I am, and thank you for giving me that opportunity to introduce myself. I love our conversations, and today we have another one, another brilliant one. Do you
Yeah.
want me to help you, or do you want me to just listen? And that's a great question.
It sure is. And it's a loaded one too, because I think that can get people all up in arms thinking, like, what do you mean? Do you just want me to listen? I think a lot of people kind of, especially when you're in a relationship where you know someone, you
Mhm.
feel the freedom, kind of,
Yes.
without really asking for that permission to give your opinion. And I think that as we learn, if we could all learn from just listening and asking permission to respond. But that's something we'll talk about as we get further into this conversation. I'm going to let you lead us today, Andy.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, actually it is a loaded question, because a lot of the time we don't, like you said, we don't necessarily sit back and wait to find out if they want our help. Lots of times when our friends and families come to us, they're not looking to solve the problem. In a lot of cases, they already have their preferred solution. They just want to vent. They just want to they just want somebody to hear them, somebody to listen, and somebody to understand. When I go to my spouse, I didn't always want her to, help me come up with a solution to my problem. Sometimes I already knew what I was doing. I already knew what I wanted to do. I already had the solution in mind. I just wanted somebody to listen to me who wasn't the people um, I was trying to solve the problem with. I wanted somebody who could hear me and be, you know, and give me a compassionate ear, a kind heart, and just listen to my side and understand my side and really, you know, validate my feelings. Because oftentimes the solution that I need is from people who don't know how to validate my feelings. So oftentimes that's what I would need, is just somebody to hear me. And the neat part about that, the interesting part about that, is that we as a society have identified women as people wanting somebody to listen to them, and men as always wanting to solve the problem. And although that is more true than not, it's not at all a solid truth. There's plenty of times that guys just want somebody to listen. And there's plenty of times that women want to solve the problem more than listen. And it isn't about men or women. And it's often, like you said, more about how close is the relationship. The
Mm-hmm.
closer we are, the more we feel we automatically have permission to solve the
Mm-hmm.
problem. And that's often the case. My spouse, my children, my parents, my brother, my sister, my best friend. I believe when they come to me, they're not looking for somebody to hear them. We believe that they're just looking for a way to solve the problem. So they just get right into solving the problem, which usually ends up making the person who came to you feel worse because they're still not feeling heard. They're still not
Mm-hmm.
getting that thing they were looking for, right? So how do we know the difference? How
Yeah,
do we know
and
what a person wants?
yeah, and I agree with that. And I also think on the flip side to that, that there's also that sometimes we want to hear what we want to hear. It's
Yeah,
unfortunate, but we're not actually willing or open to receiving, you know, constructive criticism. And I really actually don't like that terminology, but constructive feedback. Sometimes we're not looking for that, at least not in the way that other people think.
right,
We might be, and we're maybe not articulating that, but we also know that a lot of the time we want to hear what we want to hear. We want it to be favorable towards us. And even if we are, especially if we come to someone with a problem that we've maybe created, we still want to hear that we're validated in doing, responding a certain way, whatever that we did. And we're not really looking to get that constructive feedback. We're not really looking for someone to fix it or tell us what to do or how to do it. And so it's like being resistant to accepting help. Like when you go to someone for, to have that heart to heart conversation, there's, I guess, in that moment before you start is really, I guess, maybe you have the obligation to yourself just to say, this is what my expectation from our conversation is, not because I'm putting up a wall, but because I just need you to hear me right now. And maybe
right,
that's how you start a conversation. But we don't typically do that. We just, when we're going through something, when we're feeling a certain way, we usually don't start off the conversation. By the way, I'm talking to you and I just want you to hear me. It's, by the way, this is what's happening. This is how I'm feeling. And then immediately there's no structure for the other person to know, well, is it that you just want me to hear you and just listen, or do you want the advice, like, and that I think can be troubling for some relationships, because if unwarranted advice is offered, especially advice that might be really good advice, and the person does takes it but then switches back the way they were before, especially, example, let's talk about a romantic relationship that's not going so great, but you share it with your girlfriends or your guy friends, and you are saying that your significant other is this, that, and the other, and you're looking for validation and support, and they say, well, I would leave him or I would leave her, or I wouldn't put up with that, or I would not tolerate that. But then you've had time to think about it, you're back with this other person. That makes it harder for the people that you go to know where they stand, as far
right,
as, like, you've come to me, you've bared your soul, and I've given you advice.
right,
And so I think that's where there could be that disconnect. How do we engage a conversation where, the outcome isn't, I want you to fix it or tell me what to do. It's just to listen to me, right? That's, I think,
right.
where there's a lot of disconnect.
Yeah, I agree, and it is about being able to tell the difference and be able to do both. And I think there's a bit of responsibility on the person who's coming for help. Like you said, if they can articulate, well, I actually just want you to listen at this point, or I'd like you to help me solve this problem, please. But there's also some responsibility on the person who the person is going to. Like if you're coming to me for with a problem, the part of the responsibility is on you to tell me whether or not you want me to listen to help you solve the problem. But part of the responsibility is also on me to not jump right into the solution,
Mm-hmm.
because I have found, and you'll probably find if you try this yourself at home, that if you listen always, and you always just listen first, they'll articulate if they want your help. Once they feel heard, they'll say, okay, now what do I do? You've been hearing me, and I get that, and I validate that, and I wanted that, but what I actually want is a solution. So if you default to just listening, and they want something more, they'll usually tell you. So that's the other thing too is, and in order to help, in order to be able to give proper advice or to make a suggestion that matters, that is applicable and fits the context, how can you do so if you don't first stop to hear what actually is happening? What's actually going on. So in both situations, you do want to listen. Even if you're solving the problem, you still want to listen first. Even if they come to you right off the bat and say, look, I got this problem I want your help with. The first thing you're going to say is, what is the problem? If you come to me, Leslie, and you say, Andy, I got a problem I want your help with, I'm going to say, okay, put your hat back on. Because that's the solution for what? I don't know. What's the problem first? Right? What are we trying to solve first? Listen to that. So if we, as the person who's doing the helping, just default to listen first, always. And then when we feel we've heard them, when we judge that we understand what's going on, we can then ask, do you want me to help you solve the problem? Or do you already have a solution that you'd rather use? And what I have found is that if they already have a solution, we don't have to have a judgment as to what their solution is. They're not looking to validate their solution, only their feelings, only the fact that, that I felt this way about what was going on. Right?
Yeah.
What's your thoughts?
No, and I agree with you there, because I think that is the main thing, is helping to let them know that you're validating that they feel a certain way. Doesn't mean that how they feel and how they're thinking is that you agree with it. It's not about you agreeing with it. It's about just allowing them to feel like, okay, you're not passing judgment. You're not coming to any specific conclusion on your own. I think that can be really hard. I think, as an example, for, growing up myself, my younger brothers used to, tell my mom everything about their relationships. But what would end up happening, it was all a one-sided, I feel this because she does this or she's done that. And so what that ends up doing is it is allowing this other person who's doing the listening to formulate opinion that's all one-sided.
Yeah.
And we have to understand that, just because we feel a certain way, it's not always that it's just our way only, that it's our opinion only, or that only our feelings have been affected. And so I think, as a person who's been in those situations where people have come to me to talk about their relationships, especially, I've had to step back a little bit, and I don't know if it's, I guess, disengage from being in the bubble and allow myself to just really hear the story, what the story behind what's happening, so I can understand how this person is feeling based on their experience, based on their perception of what's happened. Because it is, again, everyone has an opinion. Everyone has an opinion about how they feel about an experience. So that's how, as coaches, we understand that. But I think individually, before I even got into coaching, I used to be very, I don't know the word I'm looking for. I guess I would take things very personally. And I think that one of the things I think that really snapped me out of it, which was really good, and it's a work-related idea, but, working with a lawyer who had said to me, well, two of them. First one, years and years before in Florida, told me, you need to develop a thicker skin. And I didn't quite understand that at the time, because I thought, why do I have to develop a thicker skin? It's not about, I don't want people beating up on me or pushing back on me. But what he was trying to explain to me was about being able to take information that's not allowing yourself not to believe that it's a personal attack on you, but it's
Right.
actually feedback around something that you're doing. So I had to learn that. The second one was working with a lawyer a few years ago in Canada, Western Canada. And he had said to me one day about taking information down was, I want you to listen first. I want you
Yeah.
to hear me. Then you can repeat it back and then you can take your notes. And the reason why is because he wanted me to make sure that I understood, because we were very busy. He was very specialized and he wanted to make sure that I understood so that I obviously wouldn't go back and, think like I don't know how to do something and then
Right.
the work doesn't get done. The reason why I'm saying this is because I found it very valuable as I've now, gotten into coaching and gone through life a couple more years, a few more years, almost a decade later. And I realized, okay, this is a good thing. It's allowed me to learn that listening is a huge asset to
Yes.
understanding. And
Yes.
then when I understand, that's where I can learn, okay, what is it really that you want from this conversation? Because you can't, again, you can tell a person what they want to hear, but is it always what they need to hear? And
Right.
sometimes and so if what they need to hear is really what you want to say, it comes down to asking for permission, because a person coming to you without laying out the ground rules is not going to say, okay, I don't want you to tell me what you think, or I want you to
Right.
agree with me, right? They're just going to tell you how they feel. So
Right.
that's what I've learned just through my
Right.
experiences. And these were all business related, but it really helped me to become better at listening and understanding around feedback is not necessarily a personal attack on me, but I also understood around listening. And it was just learning the feedback. And the other lesson was really the same thing, was listen first so I can
Yeah.
understand.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's applicable in virtually any relationship, whether it's professional or
Mm-hmm.
personal or romantic relationships or whatever. It's applicable in virtually any relationship. We we have a difficult time helping if we don't listen first, and we can't help if they don't feel that we've granted them the respect of listening to them first. They won't let us. They don't want it. A lot of the conflict that arises from trying to help somebody comes from them not wanting you to help, or them
Mm-hmm.
not being ready to accept the help, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that part of the conversation is important, knowing when to listen and when to help. But what I actually wanted to talk about also is when we're the one asking for help, how do we know which one it is we want? Like, how do
Mm-hmm.
I know if I'm coming to you with a problem? How do I know if I want your help solving the problem? And how do I know if I really just want to be heard? Want somebody to, be on my side, or want my feelings to be validated, not my decisions, but my emotions, my feelings. How do I know? Like, how do you know when you're going to your boss or your husband or to somebody else? How do you know when you want them to help you solve the problem, and how do you know when you just want to be heard? How do we know that? What's the difference?
Yeah. So personally, and I know you might have similar, but I think yours can really be different from how my response is going to be. When I'm asking for help, I already know that I want the help. I want, whether it's just for you to listen or if I want you to really get your advice. But I've also surrounded myself with people who will say to me, listen, do you mind if I tell
Right.
you what my thoughts are on what you shared? Now, that's really, I think, how I've really recognized as how I've built up my support system is surrounding myself with people like that, because they already know me. They already understand, because I understand myself. I understand that I'm the type of person that when someone brings an idea to me that I need to mull it over for at least
Yeah.
24 hours, that
Yeah.
I can't really make a split second decision on the big key things. And that's just because I don't want to be, I sometimes don't want to, I feel pressured. And when that feeling of pressure to respond a certain way is not comfortable, it doesn't feel good. And that's allowed me to learn how to do that with my own clients and with people who are prospectives. I won't force someone to buy, to sign up with me, with the scarcity mindset that it's going away. If I have something that, of course, is starting and it's like the sign up date is like a certain date, of course, they're obviously not going to be able to sign up afterwards. But I don't do that from a scarcity point of view. It's just because that's how it was set up.
Yeah.
But I know when I'm asking for help, I've already surrounded myself with those people that are important enough that I take these types of questions to. It's the same thing, like even with my husband, like we've learned to create this dynamic of how we communicate now. It wasn't always so. It was learning about myself. It was learning about how I wanted to be heard. But then it was also me learning to hear him without coming from that emotional place. A lot of people, I think, go into conversations as their wounded self when they have those conversations about life, change, all of those things with their significant others, or even like professional. And they go in with a wounded perspective. They go in emotionally charged. They come from an emotional place.
Yeah.
And so I've recognized just for myself that that's how I know how to ask for help, because I know when it's just coming from a place of, I want to run this by you. This is something that I've been thinking about. And then I will say, what do you think? The second is I'll come to them with something and I'll say, this is how I'm feeling. I want you to just listen. And then, because I know, like, and trust these people in my community, if they feel like there's something they can share, they know me well enough to say, do you mind if I share my perspective on what you shared with me? So that's for me. Now, I'm curious to hear what you have to say about yourself, but also about your clients, because what you do is really uniquely different than anything I've seen out there in the marketplace. So I'm curious what your thoughts are.
Yeah, my experiences were much similar to yours in that originally I didn't know the difference. People came to me and I always thought they were looking for a solution to a problem. So I was just, solving problems. I thought I was great at helping people because I had solutions for everybody's problems except for my own, of course. And it turns out that actually most of the time I push people away and piss people off because they weren't really looking for my solutions. They were just looking to connect with me because I have this compassionate heart, this caring heart, because I am the person who wants to help. For a lot of people, I was the only one they could go to that would listen. And for most of them, that's all they wanted. And once I figured that out a few years ago, once I realized that, wait a minute, they don't actually want solutions. A lot of people already have solutions. I would say most people already have solutions. Many of them don't know they have solutions, but most people do have them. Once I figured that part out, it was a matter of just listening and helping them feel heard. And for a long time, almost all my clients, that's all they ever wanted was to be heard. Once they felt heard, they were then empowered to implement the solutions they already had. Right? They didn't want to put the solutions in place until they were heard, until they felt validated, until they felt somebody cared about their experiences. They didn't feel enabled to put their solutions in place, to do what they knew they wanted to do, whether that was boundaries or whether that was asking for what they wanted, or whether that was choosing a solution that didn't have an emotional consequence, or whether it was just going to my boss and saying, look, this position I have is just not working out for me. Mm-hmm. Whatever they most of them already had some kind of a solution. They weren't always great solutions. Weren't always good solutions. But it wasn't until I started to listen to people, started hearing them, started really just helping them feel, like they mattered, like their emotions mattered, like their feelings, their heart mattered. Once that happened, then people started coming to me and said, okay, I feel heard. Now what do I do? Right. And even then, only some of them did that. To this day, the majority of my clients come to me because they already know what they want to do. They just want somebody to help them make that decision. They already know what their solution is. They just don't want to be alone in making that in making that decision to do the thing. So that's my experience. Is a lot of people already have their solutions, which makes coaching 100 times easier than I thought it was going to be. Makes helping people 100 times easier than I thought it was going to be. Because listening, I mean, it's easy. It's not, but it is. I mean, if we focus purely on the skill of just listening, of really hearing a person, hearing their heart, hearing their intentions, hearing their wounds, their hurts, their fears, of hearing their dreams and their desires, and hearing who they actually are and who they want to be and how they want to show up in the world. If we hear those things, they'll solve 80% of their problems themselves. Most people already have a solution. A lot of people don't know they have a solution. The solution won't even show up in their head, in their lives, until they feel heard. So it made helping people so much easier, because then all I had to do was focus on that first skill of listening. Once I did, then I started attracting people who wanted a little bit more, who wanted, okay, how do I do this thing? Okay, well, how do you do the thing is boundaries. That's where I came up with the unconditional boundaries concept, is how do you do the thing? And even that, most of unconditional boundaries is down to listening. Like, actually listen to the per people you're interacting with and teach them how to listen to you. That's it. There's a little bit more than that, but not much. Right? So that was my experience. It really was about the listening. And that's why, from the helping point of view, my best advice is be really good at listening. Because when you're really good at listening, you'll find they don't want or need your solutions, because you don't know their life like they do.
Yeah, right. Thank you. But so now here's where I want for you to tell us, as your co-host and as the listeners, is how did you find out how did you find out or create that for yourself? Because you're creating this for other people, but how do you know when you're asking for help and when you just need someone to listen? What has been your experience personally for yourself, and how has that helped you, especially with what you do, helped you creating those boundaries for yourself in your own personal life? Because I'm curious about that.
That's easy. I was a lot of anger and frustration. I would go to people for help. I would say, this is what's going on in my life. I don't know what to do. And I got a crap ton of solutions that did diddly squat for me, that were useless, even harmful in many cases. You're not getting much done. Just sit down and do more work, because that's a solution I can do. You're not feeling success in romantic relationships. You're not finding, a girlfriend or a partner. Go date more, because that feels easy. If you're not getting a job, apply for more jobs, because that is a wonderful experience, getting rejected all those times. Their solutions were not just not appropriate, they were harmful. When I tried, because I heard the same answers over and over and over again, I tried those answers every time I got them. I'd go and say to somebody, I don't know how to find a job, and they would say, here, let me help you with your resume so that you can pass it out 1,000 times instead of just 20. I'd go to the welfare office, and they'd say, yeah, you don't get welfare unless you're passing out 20 resumes a week. Great. Do you know what that does to a person's mental health? Mm-hmm. Being rejected 20 times a week, being told you don't have the skill set to do entry-level work 20 times a week. To apply 20 times a week to a town that has maybe 1,000 jobs grand total, most of which are filled already. Like, I was in a small town. I didn't have, I wasn't in a major city, but I could just walk down the block and apply to the next place, to the next place, to the next place. It was a matter of a week or two, and I'd applied everywhere I knew that had jobs available, that weren't doctors and lawyers' offices where I had to have it, 30 years in a university. My mental health crushed for decades because of the advice that I was getting. And so that when I started helping people, I realized, wait a minute, this advice that I think is the solution to their life could actually crush their mental health too. Could hurt them too. So let me listen to what they want. Let me actually really pay attention to who they are, their dreams and desires, their fears, their traumas, everything. Get as much of their perspective as I can. And I don't care if I have to listen to them for 7 hours or 7 weeks. I'll listen to them until I have enough of their perspective that I can then offer a solution. And what I found is, in the listening, they would eventually get to the point where they'd ask me for a solution. And that's when I realized that, wait a minute, I don't have to have solutions until they ask me. All I got to do is get really good at hearing their life story, whatever that story is. At first, a lot of people were giving me their entire life story. This is my childhood. This is my, my relationships. This is my career. This is, the whole thing. But eventually, it came down. I narrowed that down to, okay, this is your problem. You have a problem at work. So tell me about your work story. Whether it's this job or past jobs or your career story, or you're having this problem in your relationship, in your romantic relationship. So tell me about your romantic relationship history. How many dates have you been on? How many people have you dated? How many people have you, had significant relationships with? And when did you start? And when was the last one? What was it like? And get into those stories and really, really care about what they say, because what I discovered is, as I'm asking them about their story, they would see the patterns. They would see the solutions. They would see, oh, maybe this is why I'm doing stuff. Again, 80% of the time, not all the time, but 80% of the time. And that other 20%, they would say, okay, this is my story. Now what? So it means I only had to come up with 20% of the solutions instead of 100%. And it also meant that by the time I did come up with some advice, I knew enough about their story that I could seriously customize that advice to their story. Instead of telling everybody to just put a hat on when you go out in the rain. Because not everybody wants to wear a hat.
Yeah, no, I love that. I think just to kind of wrap it into a pretty bow, what you've shared, and I think it's something that we both share together, is in our process of learning about listening to other people and listening to them to help them, learning their history, learning about their life story, learning what makes them tick, letting them feel really felt, that they feel understood about what they're, and it's not necessarily that we have to relate on every event that the person goes through, but just getting to that point where they feel that connection has taught us how we personally will go out and ask for help for ourselves, or to ask for others to listen. And the reason why I'm saying this is because in our personal relationship outside of this channel, we do that. We have that that space that we've created for each other to talk about business, but also to talk about personal life. And we have allowed each other to just speak and not necessarily offer advice or offer any solution, but just to talk it through. Because sometimes you just need to talk it through. You just need to, like for me, as an example, I need to hear myself speaking the words out loud.
Yeah.
That helps me to make a decision. It doesn't mean that I don't already know the answer, but sometimes it also reveals a bigger, better, realization of like how to manage something. So I really love that. And you really, and I love how you shared about your transitioning from, understanding that all of the advice that you've been getting for yourself over the years, because you were going to people and asking them, help me fix it, without really not, I mean, and you're trying everything, but not really getting any results that really make you feel good about you. When you got into just personal development, I think what was really good about that is it gave you a window to see like, oh, now I see why, because this can be extremely harmful when all you're doing is telling someone, take door number 1, take door number 2, take door number 3, just do it, without really understanding who they are as a person, their life story, how they grew up, how they think and feel, how they usually problem solve. And when you can do that, I think it makes a bigger difference in them even finding their own answers. Like you said, it's become more of like an 80-20. They already have the answer. They're kind of just bouncing it off of you. And you're kind of just saying, hey, here's another 20% to add to that. So you have 100% of an idea of where you can go with your solution. So I love that.
Yeah. Yeah. And it was about for me, not knowing whether or not I was asking for help or asking for, somebody to listen, asking to be heard or asking for help. I didn't know the difference. So I would ask for help because that's what you do. And the help I would get was almost always useless or, like I said, and sometimes harmful. So that's when I started to understand the difference of asking to be heard first. Are you willing to sit down and listen to me? This is what's going on with my life. Because what I was able to do then is I was able to sift through those people who were willing to sit down and listen. Because if you weren't willing to sit down and listen, if you were going to hear me say a sentence or two and then throw advice at me, then I was going to get pissed off and walk away. So you weren't going to be a friend of mine anyway. So it helped me to filter out those people who weren't going to help and were just going to throw their generic cookie cutter solutions at me. And I mean, throw them at me because they didn't pay attention enough to offer them to me. They threw them at me. They insisted I do this thing. And if I don't do this thing, they're not going to help me. I have a client whose parents are doing that. If he doesn't do the thing his parents want him to do, they're refusing to help him at all. That's the opposite of help. That's control. And I didn't want to be controlled. So in order to not be controlled, I had to find people who are willing to listen. And then when I found people who are willing to listen, then I would ask them, okay, you're willing to listen to me. Can you help me? And usually in the process of them listening to me, I could find out if the way they were listening or how the solutions they were going to offer was going to be anything useful to me. Because while they're listening to me, I'm learning a little bit about them too. Right. So that's what it came down to me. And this is what the whole process of how, when I became a coach, when I started helping people, I realized that this is how clients can figure out if I'm their right coach or not. I'm the right help that they need. Because if I'm listening to them, but I'm not listening in the way that they find useful, I'm not the person that they need help from. Right? They need help, but from somebody different. Great. That's perfect. Let's figure that out early on so that we're not struggling and causing frustration and stress for 3 months or 3 years trying to figure stuff out.
Yeah.
Right. So yeah, that was my journey of learning when I wanted to be heard and when I wanted some help. I had to learn to be selective of who I asked for help for, because I was asking like everybody and their dog if they would help me.
Right. And I think too, when people want to help, sometimes that comes from the ego, right? Like, I have all the answers. And it doesn't mean that they're doing it maliciously, but it does come from the ego. Like, oh, let me tell you, this is how I would do it.
Yeah.
So do this,
Yeah.
without really understanding the person behind the question with the feelings and all of that.
Yeah.
So here's a flip to that. How do you recognize when someone really just wants you to listen? Because I think, and I think this is really something we both have learned to do, that is, how do you recognize when someone just says, I want to talk, and you're like, okay, is it, you really just want to talk to me and you want me to listen? How do you recognize that on their end, that they're not looking for it? Because I know how we can recognize it for ourselves when we learn about it. How do we really recognize when they actually don't, how about this, don't even really want help? They just want someone to, like, just to vent at, because sometimes it just becomes that venting session. And then how do you allow yourself to release the ego from giving them advice that may even be what they need to hear, but is they're, again, like you've said it, they're not really ready to listen.
Yeah. There's two parts to the answer to that question. First of all, figure out who you are. Are you the person who wants to help them solve the problem? Or are you the person who can sit back and be the compassionate heart? Can you be the shoulder they cry on or the person they go to? Or do you need to solve the problem? Because some of us don't have the ability to set our ego aside and say, I can't solve the problem. I don't have to solve the problem. And by ego, I don't mean the arrogant part of ourselves that has to solve a problem. I mean that part of our brain that wants to feel like we're needed. That part of our self that wants to feel like we're important. That's ego. We all have it. It's not a bad thing. There's a reason to have it. And when we can put that aside to listen, that's the people who can be there for somebody when they just want to be heard. So step one is to know, are you that person? Can you do that? Some of us can't. Some of us can't yet. Some of us still need to learn how to do that. Some of us don't want to. So first, identify that. Second, if you can be that person who sets aside your ego and says, you know what, I don't need to solve your problem. I'm willing to just let you listen, or let you solve it yourself. I'll listen to you and figure out what, and help you, help you feel like, talk through it and feel heard. If you are that person or want to be that person, then can you listen without offering a solution? Do you have the presence of mind to ask the questions that help you understand the situation, but don't ask the questions that lead them to your answer? Because that took me a while to practice. That took me a while to differentiate. When I was helping people, I kept asking them leading questions. And to this day, a lot of clients still ask me, are you leading me somewhere? I'm like, no. Do you want me to? I mean, I can. I'm not going to lead you to a solution. If I have a suggestion, I'm going to just make the suggestion. But if you're able to sit back and listen to them, then just ask questions that help you understand what's going on for them. And so it's first to know, are you able to do that? Which kind of person are you, and where in that spectrum are you? And second, just simply ask questions that help you understand where they're at right now, what their view of the world looks like right now, what their values and desires are right now. They might change. They might have been different from last week. They might be different next week, but where are they at right now? And so that's how we can do that. That's how we can know which we are, which one we are. Can you do that? And that's how we do it, is simply by asking the questions. Now, this is what you and I do for each other. We just ask the questions. Oftentimes, when you're trying to think something out, I'm asking you questions about what is it you're talking about, because sometimes I'm confused as to where you're coming from. Or same with you, when I'm trying to figure stuff out, you're asking me questions about where I'm coming from. Sometimes there's some clarification, and sometimes in the clarification is where I find, or you find, the answer.
Mm-hmm.
Right? It's in that clarification. So that's enough. And most of the time that is all we need. And so that's how I would tell you how to know the difference.
Yeah. And I think too, what I've also learned through my experience is when I am actually seeking out a solution, if it's a specific thing, I am going to ask somebody who's already done it or has got some kind of idea. So it's like, as an example, you're learning to drive a car. You're not going to ask somebody who's never driven a car before have to teach you to drive. You're going to ask someone that you know who knows how to drive, who has a driver's license to teach you how to drive. That's kind of like, so I kind of like look at that as my way of, if I am looking for a specific answer that I know someone actually has the answer for, then I'll ask them. But when it comes to like the questions of, especially I think self-worth, self-esteem, those questions have to be they have to be approached from a listening ear, because everybody's different. Everyone can have, we can all sit in the same room. Let's have like a room of 10 people experiencing this very same thing, and we'll all walk away with a different perspective.
Yeah.
It's just how we're wired, and that's okay. I think that's great, because in that, and this is why I've told you why I love group coaching so much, because in that you could get different ideas based around the experience, and actually, because you're having a conversation now with 9 other people that were in the room with you that experienced the same thing, and it can help lead you to your answer. It could help lead the other 9 people each individually to their own answers. So that's why I like group coaching. And I just took it off on a tangent for a second, but it's just, again, it just comes down to, for me, knowing the difference when someone is asking for help and when someone's just asking to be heard. But that takes skill. So it does not. So if it's just like you're like, again, being in, I think it's come naturally to you and I, because we've learned a lot of things. So this skill set, and it's something that I've actually been doing my whole life. People have come to me my whole life asking for advice, but just when I understood that, and coming from a healthier, more evolved, more informed place, I can actually help people. But I think just as the normal, like, I don't know if I want to say the normal, but just like the everyday person who's going into a conversation with someone and they haven't gone through a personal development course or program, or just a journey, and now you're having conversations, and you're learning to maybe create a deeper bond with someone in your life, and you're learning those boundaries. That's when, again, that can then come down to the question of, I really do need to find someone who has the answer, meaning you are the unconditional boundaries coach. This is what you do. So if someone is wanting to have, specific, it has to do with their relationship and how they are navigating out, the dynamics of 2 different personalities trying to like coexist in the same space, or not, doesn't matter, but they're just learning to coexist. That's where you come in, because you're like, say, okay, well, it's not, and it's all not just one-sided. And I think that's what a lot of people think. Oh, you go to a coach and it's all one-sided. No, because there's 2 sides to every story, and then there's a truth, right?
Yeah.
But being okay with your side and that other person's side, and then coming to an agreement. That's how I think has been really helpful just for myself in my relationships. Is there's 2 sides, and then there's the agreement that we come to, because we're not always going to agree on every single level. And so going and asking someone for help when you know they have the answer is great. That's number 1. But secondly, is also knowing that, again, like I'll use the 10 people in a room analogy again. You're all going to walk away with something different. So someone going to a coach that has the answers to, or the the steps to help them, guide them through their specific area that they're trying to improve upon, doesn't necessarily mean that every person who goes through it is walking away with the same experience, but they're
Yes.
walking away with their own transformation based on their experience that helps them to move through life. That's
Yeah.
when I say asking for help, you absolutely 100% should go to someone you know who has the skill set to help you. They're not giving you all of the answers. They're helping you, guide you as you discover your answers along the way. And they're giving you the prompts. Like you said, it's an 80-20. It becomes an 80-20, and you create that 100%.
Yeah.
So I hope that made sense.
Yeah.
I was trying to like go somewhere with what my analogy.
Yeah. Basically, it's knowing when you need help and when you need somebody to listen to, and going to somebody who can help you when you need help, and going to somebody who can listen when you need to be listened to. Yeah, and it is the difference. And essentially, this whole thing comes down to, on both sides of the conversation, whether you're asking for help or offering help, it's important to know when help is needed or requested,
Mm-hmm.
and when it isn't. Right? Because in all situations, we should be listening. In all situations, help is useless if we don't listen first. So in all situations, we should always be listening and ask to be listened to. In all situations, if I'm not listening or not being listened to, there is no conversation. So in all situations, listen first, and then on both sides of the conversation, whether you're the helper or the person asking you for help, understand and recognize when that help is asked for, when it's time, when that's appropriate, because it isn't always.
Mm-hmm.
As a matter of fact, I'm going to say that the majority of our conversations, one or the other of us isn't really asking for help. We're really just talking stuff out, right? We're just talking out the ideas, because oftentimes it's the first time we've actually said it out loud, or
Mm-hmm.
or maybe it's not the first time. Sometimes it isn't the first time, but we need a reminder. We need to remind ourselves. I know that sometimes I'll be sitting there on a couch playing video games for a week at a time, until the next time I talk to Leslie about that particular thing, and I go, remember last week when I said this thing? Guess what I'm saying again this week?
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? We've had those conversations,
Of
and
course.
it's not because I need you to help me with it. Sometimes I do, but not usually. It's just I'm looking to say it out loud again, because although I said it the first time, I didn't really take action on it. I really didn't do something about it. So, I think it is about recognizing on both sides of the conversation when the help is offered. And the easiest way to recognize that is to offer the help and say, do I have your permission? Would you like me to? Or if you're asking, would you help me? Or would you, just listen to me? So the clear request is the easiest and simplest way for clear communication, right? And that's what we're coming down to here. If I want to be heard, then ask for that. If I want to
Mm-hmm.
help, if I want to be helped, then ask for that too.
Mm-hmm.
If I want to listen and not help, then mention that. If I have some help to offer, then ask for that, right? Just clearly communicate. Is this what you want? This is what I have? Do you, can I give it to you? Do you have what I need? And one last point about going to the person who knows. I like your car analogy, learning how to drive the car analogy, because my first thought was, I'm not going to go to my older brother to ask them to learn how to drive a car when they're 10 and I'm 8. But what I might do is, when they're 16 and I'm 14, I might go to them and say, should I talk to mom or should I talk to dad? Because although they might not have better advice on how to drive the car. They might have advice on who to ask. So you don't always need to go to the right person right away. Sometimes you need to go to that bridge person to help you figure out who to ask. Somebody who's already asked and maybe gotten good or bad advice. They might be able to help you find out who to ask. So I wanted to add that piece in there too, because sometimes you do need to go to somebody in between to find out where to go. Right?
Yeah. And you brought up something as well, is like revisiting the conversation. I know for myself personally, there has been, and we've had conversations where we've had a conversation the week earlier and it's brought up again the next week. And that's just because through that entire week, the processing hasn't really, finished or been started. A lot of the time we can, I don't want to deal with it. And that's just because there's a lot of the emotional piece to it, right?
Yeah.
Is like, oh, I don't want to deal with it because it makes me feel a certain way. So I want to bring it up again. This is why I said having that circle, I will always continuously press this point. Having those people in your life that you can go to. I've set myself up this way intentionally. And that is because I know that if I have something I need to get off my chest, or if I have something that I need help with, or if I have something I want someone to just listen, I have that solid community. And that is why I will always continue to press it, because I feel like if you can build that solid community, even if it's a community of one to start with, and then you add another, and then you add another, and you don't have to have like 100 people in your circle. It's having quality listeners, people who will have your back. They're not judging you or criticizing you. They're not giving you bad advice, or they're not just offering up advice without really hearing you. They're giving you the space to really hear what you have to say, to share what you have to say. They ask you permission if they can share their thoughts, so they can understand what you're saying. Doesn't necessarily mean they're going to give you the way out. They're still maybe just asking questions so they get a better understanding. But that is why it's so important, I feel like, especially when you are looking for help, or when you are just looking for someone to listen, is having those people. I think it makes the biggest difference. It really does.
Yeah.
It's made a huge difference for me.
Exactly. Exactly. It's having those people. And like you said, start with one. If you don't have any, get one. Find one person that'll listen to you. And it isn't about having a whole, baseball team of people you can go to. It's ultimately, if you have a good circle when there are 3 to 5 people that you can go to under different circumstances. One is enough to start with, but they're not enough to finish. You need more than one in the end. But if you don't have any, start with one. Right? If you have one, and you trust them and they trust you, then get another. Because sometimes that person you can go to has their own stuff. Sometimes they're not going to be the appropriate person to listen to this particular problem. Right? My wife wasn't the best person to go to when I was questioning marital problems. Right? When I was having problems with my wife, she wasn't the best person to go to with that. So having somebody else to talk to, not because I wanted to, break up with my wife, or, she was, doing all kind of bad things, but I didn't know how to handle stuff. So go to somebody else, somebody who, will listen. And when you have at least 3 and no more than 5 people that you can go to, then you can have a whole baseball team of people that you just go to for specific solutions. I got my mechanic friend. I got my, my electrician friend. I got my relationship friend, whatever. But having that 3 to 5 people, core people who will listen to you, will help you feel heard. That's important.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Well, look at that. We just finished at an hour. Gee, why do I sound so perplexed by this, or amazed, when this happens every single time? But it's been a pleasure talking about this. I think it's an important topic, because maybe this will help somebody out there who maybe is in the situation where a lot of their friends come to them for advice and they offer up that advice. And maybe the advice is taken or not. Or maybe somebody out there is always going and asking for advice or going always asking to be heard, but they're always given advice and it's not what
Right.
they're looking for. So they're not feeling connected to those people in their lives. So I'm hoping that if that's you that's listening, you're watching this, that this has helped you in some way to get a better
Yeah.
understanding of that.
Yeah. I hope so too. I hope so too. I hope that this has helped some of you figure out where you are in the listening or the giving advice area, like where on that scale you are, where you fit most, and maybe you fit differently with different people. I also hope that you have some ways to become more the person you want to be, whether you are the person who offers solutions and you don't listen enough, or whether you're the person who listens all the time and never has solutions, or whether you're the person who just always asks for help and never gets the advice you want, but you know how now you can know that look for some people that know how to listen. Like whatever it is you need, I hope we offered something to help you out. And of course, if we did, then like the video, subscribe, comment, let us know what your thoughts are around this subject, or any other subject you'd like us to talk about. We'd like to hear from you. We'd like you to hear more from us if this has been helpful to you, if this has been something that you enjoyed. Let us know. And thank you for participating in this conversation with us. And thank you, Leslie, for helping create such a wonderful conversation.
Oh, thank you, Andy. I feel the same way about you. Yeah, so yeah, thank you everyone for watching. And if you're watching it live or whether you're watching it back, we appreciate you. I just want to end this in the words of my co-host Andy, whether we're offering someone our support or asking someone for their support, knowing the point of the conversation can and should have a significant effect on what's said and more specifically how it's said. I hope you guys have a great rest of your day, a fantastic week. We will be back next Friday at 1 p.m. Eastern with another amazing conversation. Until then, we'll see you next time.
Bye bye, everybody.